Hello, welcome back. Good to see you all.
Nice. Thank you for your patience this morning. We were working out some lighting issues and had to rearrange things a little bit. Daniel Sherman has given me some great ideas for better production, but I have yet to get the gear. So making do for now with some natural light in the still somewhat winter wonderland up here that I'm in. How many of you are still in a winter feeling situation? Yeah. And how many of you have like spring coming full on? Awesome. Wow. Neat.
Sorry. We've got, can you hear me? So in Denmark, we've got, it's classic that it's spring right now, it's really warm, and next week it's probably going to go really cold again.
Oh, wow.
March is always like that. You go away, and then, so
And it gets cold again.
not to put everything away from the winter clothing.
Right. Wonderful. Yay. Well, today we're going to be focusing on the fire element. And it's the last of our 5-class series. Thank you for those of you who I can see you and you're here live. It's wonderful to see your faces. And just greetings to all of those who can't be here live today as well. And for those who are tuning in on the videos, I just encourage you to use the time that we do our breakout rooms to do a little journaling and inner inquiry around the subject matter that we're covering. I have been going through it the last couple of weeks. It's been a pretty deep dive healing crisis that, every time I thought that I kind of knew what was going on, it would take another turn and surprise me and bring up a lot more material. Very humbling. And it's like sort of a death kind of feeling in a way. So I guess it's that time when you're shedding a skin, I've outgrown something that had become maybe a synthetic, self identity or something that I was running that came from a long time ago. And it's just my system couldn't handle it being there anymore. But it was so deeply rooted that it's just been a lot to try to like unspindle it and kind of like work it out. And boy, there's a lot of sort of contractions and a lot of crying, on the part of, I think the part that's being left in the dust. And then just the feeling of like, I don't know what's going on, or where I'm going now. And I feel like that really feeds well into the heart aspect of the fire element, because the heart is carrying that inner flame of who we really are, of the frequency that is the feeling of ourself. And in the sort of delirium of the fevers and the pain and everything, it was like this spinning kind of world of remember when we used to have VHS tapes, and if you wanted to go back, you'd have to like go fast forward backwards and see all that material, like, and like it was like that kind of, but really disorienting and kind of nauseating. And I would just have to find like one place where I could center myself that felt real, that felt like the truth of a core. And the heart center is so apt for that. And yeah, so thank you for your patience over the last couple weeks and even today, because I feel like a newborn baby just coming in to this scene with y'all. I just want to thank David and Gilles for giving me this opportunity to go through these elements with you this winter. And also use this opportunity to say that I do maintain ownership of my own image and voice, and that the sort of fair use and sharing of this material would be to share from your own understanding with the people who you think would be interested. And then if they want more, to have them sign up with David for the recordings. And yeah, that said, that just feels like part of a truth of my heart. So just bringing that out there. Yeah, so the heart is very much connected to that sense of speech, the sense of the truth as expressed through the tongue. So the tongue, the tip of the tongue is reflecting that heart condition. Yeah. And we think about language and the tongue and the heart, and how all of our different languages, we use the tongue in different places on the palate that forms our faces and forms our heart's understanding through the language that we're speaking. And just to feel really in the tongue itself, the places of tension, the places of easy contact with the palate. Classically, in the universal Tao system, we're using the tip of the tongue behind the two front teeth on the front of the palate to sort of connect a loop of energy that's going around the body in the microcosmic orbit. So that microcosmic orbit energy is going up the back, up the spine, and cresting up over the crown, and then coming down. And when we get to this place right here, where we kind of, when we were being formed in embryo, our eyes started out way on the sides, and they came forward. They came forward to bring us into a self. And this little place right here under the nose has a lot of information in it about how that happened. And it's like behind this place between the roots of the two front teeth, our tongue can go right back there and connect, and then become the transfer point for the energy coming down to the root of the tongue, to the throat, and then down through the heart center and down around the bottom of the body again. So how many of you are familiar with the microcosmic orbit? Yeah, okay, pretty much everyone. In exploring the microcosmic orbit over the years, I came up with a practice that I really love and I love to share, and I feel like it is really it's been really good for my heart. So I used to have something called heart yin deficiency. It's, you know, it's a label, it's a diagnosis, but it explained what was happening in my body, and that in my heart center, there wasn't enough yin energy there to basically hold all of the energy. And so there was a compulsion to say whatever was on my mind. Let me see what David has to say here. Okay, Gilles calls the microcosmic orbit the fountain of life. Yeah, nice. So because of this sort of diagnosis and this thing of just saying like compulsively what was in my heart, you know, to the detriment of relationships and to reading the room sometimes, I tried to learn how to hold my tongue, but in a way that was true to myself. And the practice that came out of that is something that I love to share, and I thought today I would share it a little bit, just as an inner practice around our hearts, and then we can go more into the other aspects of the fire phase. Does that sound okay? Yeah. All right. So basically, I would put my tongue at that place behind the palate that I mentioned, and even get a little bit of a metallic taste in my mouth from it, like that feeling of an electrical connection there. And it would plug in a way which would make it um, not as easy to just spout out anything through speech. And I would pull the rest of my tongue up on my palate as well. So the places that say ta, nya, ka, ga, nga, all the places, and if you have a different language, you might have different consonants than I do. But I would try to relax my tongue into all of those parts of my palate and really plug it in. And then I would feel there'd be an energy that would start to form around my tongue because it was finally at rest. And that yin energy that I was looking for in my heart could actually be produced by this exercise of letting my tongue itself just rest and absorb. And a nice like side effect of it too is that the pituitary gland is being very well supported when the tongue is resting on the palate like this. There's a little bit of a suction and a feeling of spreading at the palate, a feeling of spreading out towards the ears, and that this beautiful crystal palace of the pituitary gland can start to have enough room to really be that crystal palace. I learned around this time that a lot of the youth who were getting tongue piercings, maybe not a lot, but there was an experience that was being seen in hospitals with kids getting congestive heart issues. And it was basically coming from the tongue piercings. And that showed me again how much the tongue and the heart are literally connected. So I looked into, how that's so, and it's so interesting. So let's just have your tongue rest, and I'll just talk you through this connection. So you're going to feel your tongue resting on your palate, like they're getting married together. And it could be like a really delicious lozenge or honey or something there that is delicious and spreading. And then we're going to follow the layer of tissue that is the top lining of the tongue. We're going to follow that back, all the way back to the back of the throat. And then it's going to follow the root of the tongue down around the back of the neck. So the top lining of the tongue becomes the back lining of the root of the tongue. And we're going to let that keep cascading down into the pericardium. Feeling the back of the heart able to rest into the back of the pericardium. Again, like they're getting married there. Noticing any places back at the back aspect of the heart where there's any pressure or kind of scorched feeling areas between the back of the heart and the pericardium. And letting this yin essence, this honeyed connection, just pour down and fill in any of those areas of pressure or unease, and creating just enough space back there that the heart can rest, that the breath can be felt behind the heart in a supportive manner. So that's the tip of the tongue, across the top of the tongue and down to the back of the pericardium. And you can plug it into the diaphragm at the back root of the pericardium. And breathing into the back of that diaphragm. Yeah. Now we'll just go back to the tip of the tongue, leaving that whole back aspect of those, the linings of the tongue, root of the tongue and pericardium. And we'll go to the tip of the tongue and we'll do the underneath part of the tongue. So we'll follow the tissue, the lining of the bottom of the tongue. I'm going to follow that down along the front of the root of the tongue. Beautiful energy being absorbed and suffusing all of that tissue. And then from the root of the tongue, continuing behind the sternum, behind the trachea, down on to the pericardium. Softening that pericardium, making more room. More room for the breath, more room for the absorption of nutrients energetically into the heart. And we can follow that down the front of the pericardium into the root of the pericardium where it connects with the diaphragm. And you can feel the front and the back potentially connected down there. And also then a mirror of that at the tip of the tongue, the top and the bottom of the tongue. And we can do the sides at the same time in the interest of the amount of time that we have. They just mirror each other. If you find in doing this that the two sides are really different, then I just recommend that you go through this practice one side at a time at a later date. So we'll feel that tip of the tongue again, the whole paddle of the tongue resting on the palate, resting language, sending language and speech back to be nourished into the heart. And following the lining of the tongue along each side. Down the sides of the root of the tongue, down the throat. And continuing down into the pericardium. opening and softening both sides of the pericardium so that breath can equally move around the pericardium and around the heart. All the way down to the root of the pericardium at the diaphragm. And now letting yourself breathe into the whole structure of these contiguous linings. Just noticing any places around this structure that have any pressure differentials. And letting yourself from the inside out balance those out. Giving your heart permission to take up all the space it needs. So much of the heart energy is about timing. And when we look at the virtues of the heart, we're noticing love and respect, and honor, right timing. And then some of the difficulties of the heart would be hastiness and impatience, leading to cruelty to ourselves or others. Some people find it a good practice when we're confronted with something that we feel we need to answer to just hold the tongue for about 6 beats of the heart or more. To make room for the heart's truth before that speech comes, because our words carry power. Yeah. Thank you so much for going through that exercise together. I'm going to take us from that root of the pericardium at the diaphragm, and we're going to travel down to the small intestine from there. Yeah. So we're going to dive down into the root of the pericardium, feeling as much as we can, or just knowing that it's connecting to the diaphragm. And contiguous fibers from these fascial planes are now moving below the diaphragm at the level of the spine and emerging as the mesenteric root of the small intestine. So just breathing along the front of the spine, about this, 3 to 4 inches. And that mesenteric root has a little bit of an angle to it, going from the upper left to the lower right part of the spine below the diaphragm. Very strong connection there at the spine. Letting your breath come down from the root of the diaphragm into the mesenteric root of the small intestine. Now this about 3-inch, very strong ligament of the mesentery has such an incredible expansion from that root, where it just unfurls out to support the entire small intestine as it's looping through your abdomen. So we have very small at the bottom and then opening quickly into a great expanse that's very blood rich, related back to that kind of essence of fire. Yeah, so that whole, and it looks like coral, if you can imagine coral under the ocean with a root and then an opening that just, it has these waves that are moving. And so as the small intestine is taking in our nutrients, it's all of those nutrients are moving through the mesenteric, what is it called? The portal vein system that's alive inside the mesentery, all of this blood-rich veins that are bringing those nutrients straight to the liver. So let's just sit with that process for a couple of breaths. Mesenteric root opening, expanding, and expressing into this beautiful organ of the small intestine, which is swimming in the abdomen, absorbing nutrients. And as we're breathing into that structure, we can again feel anywhere that feels any sense of being pinched, of not having enough space, of feeling scorched, cold. Bringing the power of our mind, our inner eye, and our breath to those areas. Smiling down on them. Anywhere that folds of the mesentery might have gotten a little stuck together. Just finding the fluidity inside and any body movements that just help open that aspect. That we have a right to all of our nutrition, that we work hard for it, to digest it and to make it available. And that we have a right to breathe into all those different folds. No one can do that for us but us. And that sound, ha, ha, is the sound that releases excess heat from the body. We can feel that, the heat coming, and the sense of pressure. So if there's a place, for example, in your small intestine and your mesentery that feels like there's too much pressure, it doesn't have the capacity to really open up into itself, you might give your voice to that part. Like, that's the part that's making the noise. Yeah. Just breathing behind and around and in front of and inside of all of those loops and twists and turns of the mesentery and the small intestine. Feeling this fire, this combustion inside, a healthy fire that's bringing our nutrients right where they need to go. Like we did with our large intestine, if we put our hands on our rib cage and support the back of the rib cage so that our breath gets a directive to breathe and expand there. We can feel that the small intestine also gets more room to do its inner alchemy. To release any impatience or hastiness that we have there. So we have time to absorb and be nourished. Nice. Good. So let's just take go out a little bit and take a bird's eye view on this. We have our tongue in our mouth. We have the root of the tongue coming down and marrying into the pericardium, which supports the heart and makes enough room for the heart. We make space for the heart inside and around the pericardium. And we marry into the diaphragm and then re-emerge from below the diaphragm at the spine with the expression of this beautiful small intestine, flame, coral. Yeah. Feeling it all as one system here. Just harmonizing, equalizing, and releasing any last bits of compulsion, hastiness, or pressure. And then the other thing to do is to find places where there's just not enough oxygen to keep the fire burning. And then to go and as if bring oxygen with a, what are those things called? Bellows into the places that need air to keep the fire banked and really healthy. So the whole base of the fire of the small intestine and the fire of the heart, it's healthy all around. Yeah. So breathing evenly and kind of releasing any old cold ash. Just moving that out of the way. Yeah, just attending to your fire. Beautiful. Thank you. We'll go after our breakout rooms. We'll go into the circulation sex and the triple warmer aspects of the fire. And just a little lead into that is just this movement, moving energy down from the heart to the solar plexus to the lower abdomen. Yeah, so what I invite you to share with each other today or to journal about is how did it feel? How was it for you to connect the tip of the tongue down to the pericardium and to emerge into the small intestine? What was the sort of state of the fire in your small intestine? And in what ways were you able to engage with the fire in both of these cauldrons that helped it feel brighter, more friendly fire? Yeah, and what were any challenges around that as well? Thank you.
Okay, breakout groups. Let's see here. Oh, pause recording. We'll be back.
What it does to us, because sort of instead of staying with it, if it makes sense. I'm just curious.
Oh, you're on mute, Tiffany.
Oh, so as you're following the different membranes, it feels like there can be a disconnect, and then you go into your mind and thinking, and you're not like with that physical structure anymore. Yeah, I mean, part of that is that this takes work. And with the universal Tao practices, the TaoTouch practices, just like any other thing that we do, we have to create neural pathways in order for us to be able to do them. So, like if someone sews and is an excellent seamstress or embroiderer, we're going to see in the brain lit up this incredible network, that's devoted to this activity. And it's built over time, So part of it, if it's something that we enjoy, something that we feel like is relevant or of value, then we can devote, the effort and time into the practice. And then we build a capacity, and we build a kind of a cumulative, almost like legacy that we can then go in and actually tune into at some point when we need it. But in the beginning, this kind of thing, yeah, it's not easy. And I mentioned how I sort of made this up out of a need of myself, and it took a long time for me to follow these things. And it was very much of an inner inquiry about like, okay, what's next? And now what's that connected to? So yeah. So thank you for taking the time to go over it, and just know that that possibility is there to find those connections. And if it feels relevant, then you can go into where they exist at any part along that train. And just, you can go back and forth along any of those membranes, those contiguous fibers that feel like they need help. So hopefully this gives you a framework to work with, and then you can kind of dance with it a little bit. Does that help?
Yes, and it also occurred to me that obviously when we're working with actually holding our tongue and being still, you can go down, but you can also end up sort of feeling like, wow, all this talking. So it's a good exercise to also just practice being still.
Yeah, that's true.
And something we also spoke about that I experienced over the years working with this is it really stabilizes and strengthens my breathing. So when we hold our tongue like that, it makes it easier to, I find, open up and breathe through our nasal cavities. which is another good thing about holding our tongue like that.
I think so. Yeah. So when we're holding our tongue like that, one thing that's happening is we're breathing like kind of like the silk thread through the sinuses. And when we breathe through our sinuses, we create nitric oxide. And when we create nitric oxide through breathing in our sinuses, then it shrinks the adenoids. It shrinks any inflammation that is at the surface there. So it literally does make more room for your airways. Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up. I mean, in my own practice with this, there's definitely confrontations that I'll have at different levels where there's something there that's like wants to say something or scream something. And, it's like how to be with that self part in an authentic way while also honoring the integrity of my whole sort of like fire system. And it really is like working with a fire, It's like we need the fire to warm us. We need the fire to provide us with all of the good things that it has, and we need it to not burn the house down. We need to feed the fire, and we need to kind of bank the fire and clean out the things that are keeping it from having the oxygen flow underneath. And sometimes there's things in there that aren't burning as easily or different things. So when we come up against the cruelty or the anger aspect, and there's a lot to be angry about, right? Like there's things that confront us on a daily basis that we'd prefer weren't there. So what do we do with them? It's like we're living in the real world. The heart itself and the heart meridian is something that in my training we really respect by not necessarily manipulating it directly, right? It's like we're working with the pericardium, the lining of the heart. The heart is the emperor or the empress, and it's just sitting in a enthroned chamber, and everything else is there to serve this emperor, because the emperor is then like extending and radiating to everything, what's real, what's the case, and providing the like penultimate entrainment for our will, our direction. Does that make sense? Yeah. So sometimes working with the heart, maybe I will go into a place where I open up that chamber in the pericardium and have just this most beautiful, I'll work on the throne. I'll work on the place to make the heart more comfortable in that way. Removing anything that's in the way because the heart's changing too. It's growing, it's taking in more information, and it's radiating that information that's current, that's upgraded out to the rest of the body in an electrical way. I sometimes wonder, I don't know this to be a fact, but I've played with this idea of, the animus and the anima. If, my heart is like my animus. So my heart would be like the emperor, that inner emperor. And like if in a male body, if the heart would have that like empress kind of vibe. I don't know. It's just a thought that I've considered and played with. It feels like it could be at times. But yeah, I can feel the empress heart as well. Yeah. And just yeah, talking about those meridians. So the heart meridian is coming, it's a yin meridian, so it's coming up the arm, the outside of the arm, the ulnar side of the arm up to the pinky. And then the small intestine meridian is coming down the dark meat side of that ulnar side. And it goes back into the shoulder blades. And sometimes when we have like contractions or like pinching around the shoulder blades, we can have like an idea like, okay, my fire element, my small intestine, my heart, like it needs some attending to. So sometimes like hugging ourselves to our shoulder blades and just moving them around. When we hug our shoulder blades and move our upper body in that hug, can you feel what's happening with your rib cage and your spine? And then kind of imagine and feel what's happening with that mesenteric root of the small intestine on the spine, and how, oh, if I hug myself this way, I can make more room for those particular loops of the small intestine, and just really like give a reflection, fire on fire, loving it. And then we can absorb even more. Yeah. Good. Yeah, and those fire times of the day are 11 to 1 and 1 to 3. And correct me if I'm making any mistakes. As I said earlier, I'm kind of a newborn right now. So that's that noon time of the day, and like peak fire. I mean, fire element can just be so much fun, right? The electricity and the dancing and singing and following our heart. Mhm. And it's related to the summer and the full expansion of the summer. So right now, my personal like energy isn't feeling like the super like peak fire, but it feels good to go in and like attend to the root of the fire right now. Yeah. And it feels like in the springtime, I might not be alone in, having had a bunch of sediment, come in the winter, and then the awareness of what's no longer needed being kind of rooted out, as the sap is rising and as these things are happening. And then as we work that through and digest it and go through whatever like price of awareness, in terms of pain and discomfort and the time that it takes to not feel good, um, we can use this time of that expanding wood and sap to like actually like kind of slough it off as the summer does come. Yeah. Mm. I have a nice medical qigong heart practice that I want to share with you. I'm going to stand up to do it with you. Excuse me. Okay. Some of you may have done this with me before, but I'm going to have you look at my side. And as okay, first I'm going to just talk about the embryology of the heart. Not a complete embryology of the heart, but just a little bit of how when the heart, is one of the first is the first organ that's developed, and then it's sending out its vessels, And as the vessels are being sent out, they're being expressed in the hands, in the arm buds. So the arm buds are coming out as an expression of those vessels of the heart, and they grow over time and they come all the way out until they reach their apex. And then because of the momentum, they start to come forward. And some of the joints and different things are formed, I believe, as the hands are moving forward, and they literally come in front of the heart. And the hands are sort of here. And then as the hands are more developed and they start to be able to play around, then they get to that point where they're pulling on and playing with the umbilical cord, and we're, just playing with what we have to play with in there. But I love this arm bud dance of the heart opening, developing, and coming all the way into this whole region in front of our heart, palm to heart. And you can feel as that's happening how maybe that bottom ulnar aspect of the arm is, kind of leading that, and then like the thumb and forefinger are more dedicated to like the manipulation part, and that comes later. So I find that interesting. So with that kind of sense in mind, maybe this medical Qigong, just small practice makes sense. We're going to keep our hands, our fingers facing the ground. See me. They're going to stay facing the ground. Don't have your arms bent. I'm just showing you that my fingers are facing the ground. Your arms are going to be straight. And then you're going to bring your arms forward. We're going to swing our arms at the shoulder without using muscles as much as possible, just using the momentum of the swinging of the pendulum of the arms straight. And as we swing the arms, the fingers stay pointing to the earth the whole entire time, which means that the wrists are starting to be a fulcrum as well. So just letting this move that beautiful fire element inside the body, letting it engage and open and brighten the heart. And letting yourself breathe down underneath. Relaxing as much as possible so that any of the membranes around the pericardium and heart that need a little activation, mobilization, softening, opening, have the capacity to find their physical presence of where they are in this continuum, this coordinate of space and time. How long could you keep going? Does it get easier? Something kind of starts taking over from the inside. Nice. Good. Then we can just do a little venting. Foaming with our fingers around a magnetic field. And sending everything that's had its day back into the earth, demagnetizing it from around us. Thank you for joining me in that. All right. Doesn't that feel good? It like opens and changes that and makes it a little brighter. So now that we have that sense of the effect of the medical Qigong heart arm swing exercise, let's go ahead and I'm going to lay down and do a little work with the small intestine for the last part of our meeting today. You can lean back in a chair if you want, whatever you're comfortable with. Okay, so I promised to tell you about the circulation sex and triple warmer. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but just to mention that they are part of our fire phase system and that they cycle towards the end of the day in what we consider to be happy hour. So they cycle, what is it, from 7 to 9 and 9 to 11. And then the circulation sex yin meridian comes up to the middle part of the inside of the arm, and the triple warmer down the dark meat side of the middle of the back of the arm. I've heard a lot of different ways of, I mean, they're kind of mysterious because they're not necessarily organs that we're going to be able to find in like an autopsy or something like that. They're more relationships between organs. So the circulation sex is often thought of as the endocrine system of the body, and the communication of the hormones through the body. And it also has like an electrical kind of quality to it. And then the triple warmer, I've heard described as the heart, upper abdomen and lower abdomen, but also just as like the duodenum area, the small intestine and the large intestine. And that's like, because in Ayurveda, they also have like a triple heater kind of thing. And it's more considered really a way that the digestive system works. So there's so much to say about this. I'm not going to go very deep, but it is a fascinating study to look at the triple warmer and the circulation sex. But let's just call them both communication kind of relationships that exist in the body through the glands and through the cauldrons of the body. And there's a way that energy wants to kind of sometimes go up. Fire, fire, the heat rises and it can bring with it things that are up. So one way that we care for ourselves in the fire phase is to help bring things down and settle them down through this type of encouragement from the solar plexus and down to the navel, and then down below the navel to where that bottom part of the small intestine would be. And the small intestine ends at the ileocecal valve where it empties into the cecum. And that valve is kind of like a passive valve. As far as I understand, it's just the end of a tube that is hanging. It's just passively sending material into the cecum, and then it gets closed off by pressure in the cecum. But that's where the appendix is, and that is a place of a great transition. And it's a place emotionally that we tend to hold subconscious material that we aren't really aware of yet. You know, we're not really aware yet of what it is that we're digesting in that lower right region. So again, we can walk our fingers down from the solar plexus and just like there's the place at the xiphoid process. And we can then walk our fingers sort of side to side along the top of the rib cage, gently, just feeling for the actual texture and any pressures that are there, and giving ourselves a chance to breathe behind. Not trying to necessarily like move a lot of like the organs around, but more to create a condition around the duodenum to start, where things can flow freely from the bile duct and the pancreatic duct into the duodenum. The bile duct coming from the right side, pancreatic duct coming from the left. And emulsifying all the things coming out of the stomach, bringing sodium bicarbonate and bile. To de-acidify and then bring to the right pH what we need to go through the small intestine. And then after the duodenum, the small intestine it's not that easy to feel like, oh, I'm touching my small intestine, like I'm touching my nose, you know. It's more still working the area around the small intestine that we know is there. But because the mesenteric root comes in from the top left and then goes across the spine in a long diagonal, I'll tend to start at the upper left and then just sort of zigzag a little bit across the abdomen in whatever way feels good. And then where I get a message that it's going to feel good to have some breath somewhere, because my hands are now in touch with one side of a situation, and then the breath wants to come onto the other side in order to open up a capacity for digestion, a capacity for processing, capacity for blood flow. I can use my breath in concert with my hands there, with my mind and inner smile, to map my abdomen via the small intestine. It's just taking up all the space where there's nothing else. And maybe like you would with coral, or sometimes I think of it like spaghetti in a bowl, big pieces of noodles, and then you want to get the butter or the olive oil like onto all the different surfaces of the noodles. So anywhere that the noodles are kind of stuck together, like starchy, you're like, oh, I feel that here. Let me bring you some oil. And the breath and the tension and the hands and the inner smile and mind's eye all add up. to lubricating. Now the small intestine goes all the way down to the inguinal ligament. The inguinal ligament goes between the top, the upper aspect of the pubic bone and the lower hip bone. And that provides like a barrier of the contents of the peritoneum from going down into the pelvis. And when we have a breach of that barrier, it's called a hernia. And hernias are caused by pressure building up along this inguinal ridge, this inguinal ligament. There can be a lot of pressure there sometimes. So there's just a nice self-care of just lifting gently anything that's settled down along that inguinal ligament. When I went to the Body World exhibit, and it's like it was at an LA museum, and it was the one from Germany. It was the one where people really did give consent for their bodies to be used. But there was this example of a hernia that was so like this man's small intestine, a whole entire loop of his small intestine was down in the scrotum. It had gone down and filled up the whole scrotum, all around the testicle. The whole small intestine, like a whole loop just went down into that. So hopefully we can keep our pressures here at bay. When we start paying attention to something, usually it'll start communicating, especially if we're consistent. So we can follow that which is calling our attention here to make space between different loops. Find any little knots, tangles type things. And once you find them, you can jiggle them a little bit and just breathe underneath and around them to give them space to just open and fall apart. When they start getting the enzymes and the breath, our breath is like a solvent. It literally can start melting things that have formed that aren't in our best interest anymore. And I think when things start to decontract after having been contracted for a long time, that is very uncomfortable. And we have to have a lot of faith that we are on the right track, you know, that these symptoms we're having are actually symptoms of healing. Sometimes it's hard to know. Gilles has a beautiful chapter in Healing from Within about the price of awareness. And it's worth revisiting. Also worth revisiting his chapter on detoxification in the liver, since we're entering that sap rising springtime. I just like that there's kind of no way around the discomfort of detoxifying. It's just something we have to go through. But it feels better on the other side. And then bringing the fingers back towards the navel to finish up as an orientation place. The navel is the heart of the abdomen. And then we can give ourselves these top to bottom strokes. Again, making room behind the heart for the heart fire to be bright. Thanking the small intestine, mesentery, thanking the pericardium, the heart and the tongue, thanking our endocrine glands, and all of the digestive features of the fire element to keep upgrading us spiritually and learning who we are more and more. So I just leave you with the thoughts and permission of honoring yourself, honoring your heart, giving yourself time to feel what's true. Yeah, for you, and to be patient with the growth pains that we have from time to time, in between the times when we don't have them, which are blessed times. Thanks so much for being here, everybody. Much love. Oh, I wanted to let you know that I'll be teaching a live class in May, the 7th through the 11th, up in the Sierras, just an hour from Truckee down towards Grass Valley. And it would be lovely to have any of you join us. We're going to have a wonderful time. Thanks so much, David.
My pleasure, as always. Thank you so much, Tiffany. That was wonderful. So great. What a great closing to the course.
Oh.
So nice. And thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Joining live and recording, folks. Stay in touch. Send in stuff as you go. Continue practicing, and please stay in touch with any experiences and questions and feedback, inspirations.
And David, I'm available to stay on for a few minutes if anyone wants to ask any questions, or, here at the end of the class has anything they want to share. So, but I think you're the host. I don't know if you can make me the host or if you could just keep it going.
Sure. Yeah, I can. I do have a client at noon, but I can keep the course. I can keep the room open. Yeah.
Yay, thank you.
Make you a co-host here.
Okay.
There we go. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Hope to
you.
see you again soon.
Bye.